On a warm spring night wrapped in music, champagne, and polished silverware, an estate stood glowing beneath strings of golden lights. Laughter drifted across the courtyard, blending with soft jazz and the murmur of conversations. To anyone passing by, it looked perfect, beautifully perfect. This was the Harrison wedding, a celebration of love, legacy, and two families becoming one. Guests smiled. Photographers circled. A newly married couple held hands beneath a dome of hanging lanterns, surrounded by everything a wedding should be. But perfection is a delicate thing. It shatters without warning. And on this night, it shattered in silence before it ever shattered in screams. At the center of the celebration was Evelyn Reed Harrison, 30 years old, elegant, luminous, and composed. The kind of bride who turned every head when she walked into a room. The kind who looked made for moments like this: bright eyes, soft smile, perfect posture beside the man she had just vowed to love. Her husband, Grant Harrison, 32, wore happiness like a second skin. He held her hand as if it were the most natural thing in the world. His smile was unrestrained. His future looked carved in light. He believed he had married the love of his life. He believed the night marked the beginning of forever. He believed he was safe. But belief can be a terrible, blinding thing, especially when truth sits only a few feet away. Because somewhere among the champagne glasses and congratulatory embraces stood Walter Harrison, 58 years old, powerful, respected, admired father of the groom. His presence commanded attention. His authority filled the air. People looked at him with admiration and trust. But Evelyn looked at him with something else. A mixture of fear, memory, and a longing she hated herself for feeling. And Walter looked back at her the same way a man looks at a secret he never intends to give up. To everyone around them, their glances meant nothing. A father-in-law admiring his new daughter. A bride acknowledging the patriarch of the family. But beneath those small, controlled smiles was a truth too dangerous to speak aloud. This wedding was built on a lie. For years, a truth hidden behind closed doors, whispered in dark corners, protected by guilt, tied Evelyn not to her husband, but to his father. What began as a moment she mistook for guidance had turned into an affair she could never escape. A truth she could never confess. A truth that followed her down the aisle like a shadow no light could erase. By the time she said, "I do," it wasn't love she felt. It was panic. A rising, suffocating panic. And as the night stretched on, as toasts were made and music filled the estate, Evelyn felt her chest tightening, her vision blurring, her smile cracking under the weight of a secret that refused to stay hidden. Every step she took felt heavy. Every breath felt borrowed. Every glance from Walter felt like a chain tightening around her throat. Some nights collapse quietly. Some nights reveal what was always waiting beneath the surface. But this night, this wedding night, was a fuse burning toward disaster. Because secrets don't stay secret forever. Not when guilt is choking. Not when control is suffocating. Not when obsession refuses to die. And as the guests danced beneath glittering lights, as Grant looked at his wife with eyes full of trust, as Walter watched her with the eyes of a man who believed she still belonged to him, the truth began to crack. Small, invisible cracks at first. Cracks no one noticed. Cracks that hid beneath a polished surface. But soon, those cracks would split open. The lies would break. The emotions would boil. The confrontation would ignite. And before the night reached its quiet end, two men, father and son, would lie dead on the marble floor of a hallway meant for wedding portraits, not police photographs. A bride still in her wedding gown would kneel between them, shaking uncontrollably, whispering apologies to a man she loved and a man she could never escape. The music would stop. The lights would dim. The celebration would transform into chaos. And the story that began with vows would end in blood. This is the true crime story of Evelyn Reed Harrison. A woman celebrated as a bride. A woman tortured as a secret. A woman whose choices, forced and desperate, sent her life spiraling toward tragedy. Before moving on, a quick thank you to everyone watching and supporting this channel. Your presence truly keep it alive. This community continue to grow because of people who believe in real and meaningful true crime documentaries. Please make sure you subscribe to channel. Your support makes a real difference and we love to know who's here. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. If you still haven't done, do it right now. Right, I'm still here in the comment. Let's see who's watching till the end. Don't forget to like this video too. Now, let's continue. A tragedy that began long before the wedding night, but reached its breaking point on a warm evening in May. And nothing, not the vows, not the music, not the photographs, would ever erase what happened next. August 4th, 2017, 5:28 p.m. Savannah, Georgia. The story that ended in blood did not begin on a wedding night. It began 5 years earlier, in a quiet corner of a charity auction, a room filled with polished floors, crystal champagne flutes, and the soft hum of conversation. This was where Evelyn Reed, then 25, stood alone beside a gallery wall. She was a woman who carried herself with quiet elegance, the kind people noticed for her poise before they noticed her beauty. She had an air of grace that suggested she was still learning how to belong in rooms like this. Her life had been modest, simple, not lacking in love, but lacking in opportunity. She walked through the world cautiously aware of her value, but unsure anyone else could see it. At 5:31 p.m., someone did. Walter Harrison, 53 years old at the time. A man people recognized instantly. A man who moved through the auction like he owned the very air inside it. The patriarch of the Harrison family. Founder of a multi-million-dollar real estate empire. A man whose name opened doors most people never knew existed. He approached Evelyn with the ease of someone accustomed to attention. "You're Evelyn Reed, aren't you?" he asked, as though her name were already known to him. She hesitated. "Yes. Have we met?" "Not officially," he said with a small, confident smile. "But I've heard about you." She didn't know what that meant. She didn't know that his interest was already sparked. She didn't know that this moment, polite, brief, forgettable to anyone watching, was the first thread in a web she would spend years trying to escape. That evening, their conversation lasted less than 10 minutes. A handful of questions. A compliment on her composure. A suggestion that she had potential for more. Nothing inappropriate. Nothing obvious. Nothing dangerous. Not yet. But danger rarely announces itself. It arrives gently, softly, disguised as opportunity. 3 weeks later, on August 27th, 2017, Evelyn received an unexpected invitation. A mentorship luncheon hosted by Walter's company. She almost didn't go. She told herself she had no business attending anything connected to someone like him. But her friends encouraged her. "Connections matter," they said. "You need someone to open doors for you," they insisted. So she went. She walked into the restaurant nervous, uncertain, out of place. Walter greeted her as though he had been expecting her all along. From that moment on, her world began shifting in ways she could not see. Meetings became recurring. Phone calls turned personal. Boundaries softened. Walter admired her intelligence. Told her she had a rare presence. Told her she reminded him of someone he once loved. He knew exactly what to say. Exactly where to press. Exactly how to dismantle a young woman's guard without her noticing. For Evelyn, it felt like validation, like being seen for the first time. For Walter, it was control bit by bit, subtle and quiet, tightening around her like invisible hands. There was no line crossing at first. No affair. No physical contact. But emotional entanglement is sometimes more dangerous than anything physical. By the time Evelyn realized how close they had become, she told herself it was harmless. She told herself Walter was simply a mentor. She told herself there was no reason to question his intentions. She was wrong. And the first real crack appeared on November 19th, 2017, at a company holiday dinner. After a toast, after too much wine for most of the room, Walter leaned in too close and whispered, "You deserve a life far bigger than the one you're living." Evelyn froze. He smiled gently, like it was a harmless observation. But the tone, the softness, the intimacy was unmistakable. She stepped back, unsettled. Something shifted that night. Something that should have ended their connection entirely. But it didn't. Because 2 weeks later, Evelyn met someone else. Someone who saw her with clean eyes. Someone who hadn't already blurred the lines. Grant Harrison, Walter's son. They met at a community volunteer event on December 2nd, 2017. Grant was nothing like his father, warmer, gentler, kinder in ways that were genuine rather than strategic. He liked her immediately. She did not expect to like him back, but she did. And for a moment, a brief, hopeful moment, Evelyn believed this was fate giving her a clean start. A new direction, a way out of whatever confusion Walter had wrapped her in. Grant was charming without effort, funny, steady, and he made her feel safe in a way Walter never had. But safety is fragile when someone else believes they own you. When Walter learned quietly, privately, that his son was seeing Evelyn, everything changed. January 2018, the first true confrontation. Walter didn't yell. He didn't accuse. He didn't forbid. He simply looked at Evelyn with a calmness that chilled her. "You should have told me," he murmured. I didn't think it mattered, she whispered. It matters, he said softly. More than you know. There was no threat in his voice, no anger, but there was something worse. Certainty. Possession. A silent message that made Evelyn's stomach drop. You are already mine. She left that conversation shaken, but she didn't walk away. She couldn't, not yet. Not with her heart tangled between guilt and confusion, between craving approval and craving escape. And while she grew closer to Grant, Walter made sure she could never fully leave him behind. He texted. He called. He checked in. He reminded her always gently, never overtly, that he was still there. Still watching. Still waiting. Still wanting. Evelyn tried to distance herself. She tried to draw boundaries. She tried to focus on Grant, on the future he represented. But Walter had already woven himself into the quiet corners of her life. And every time she tried to move forward, something pulled her back. This was not an affair. Not yet. Not in the way the world would later describe it. But it was something far more dangerous. A slow, deliberate erosion of her freedom. By March 2018, the lines between them were blurred beyond recognition. And by the time Evelyn realized she was sinking, she was already too far beneath the surface. This was the beginning. The first invisible step toward a tragedy 5 years in the making. A tragedy no one, not even Evelyn, saw coming. There are moments people can look back on and say, this is where everything changed. For Evelyn, it was a warm spring evening inside a hotel conference room, neutral decor, dim lights, and a quiet that felt deceptively calm. She was there for business networking, something Walter had pushed her toward for months. Exposure is opportunity, he told her. People need to see you before they respect you. She believed him. She trusted him. She leaned on his guidance more than she realized. What she didn't know was that Walter rarely gave without expecting something in return. That night, he arrived unexpectedly. Not as a mentor, not as a guiding hand, but as a man who had been waiting for the right moment. He found her standing alone near a table of brochures. She startled when she saw him. I didn't know you'd be here, she said quietly. He smiled. You didn't need to. There was something different in his voice, something more assured, more intimate, something that made Evelyn's pulse quicken with confusion rather than warmth. They talked about business, about her progress, about her confidence. But there was an undercurrent, a subtle shift in the air, in his posture, in the space between them, a shift that Evelyn felt before she understood it. At 9:02 p.m., he said he wanted to show her something. A potential partnership, he claimed. A file he'd brought specifically for her. She followed him to a quieter hallway. What happened next would mark the moment her life veered off the path she knew. He closed the door behind them, and he stepped too close. Not physically, emotionally. The words he said were simple, dangerously simple. Evelyn, I think you know what you mean to me. She froze. I admire you, she whispered. But, no, he interrupted softly. I don't mean professionally. She felt her breath catch. Walter looked at her the way no mentor should look at someone who trusts them. With too much certainty, too much hunger, too much possession. She backed up half a step. Not enough to escape, just enough for him to notice. He did not touch her. Not yet, but he reached out with something far worse. Influence. You're special, he murmured. You're brilliant. You're wasted in the life you came from. I see the woman you are meant to be. Evelyn's throat tightened. I think you're misunderstanding. No, he said. You're afraid to admit what's between us. She shook her head. There's nothing between us. He smiled slowly. Look at me and tell me that again. She couldn't. Not because she felt what he felt, but because she'd never learned how to fight someone who had shaped so much of her growing confidence. Someone she believed wanted the best for her. Walter stepped closer, still not touching, still giving her the illusion of choice. Evelyn, I know you feel this. Her voice cracked. Walter, please don't. Her plea broke something in him. Not anger, certainty. You're meant for more than my son, he said quietly. I knew it the moment I met you. The sentence hit her like a blow. Air left her lungs. Her heart slammed against her ribs. This is not right, she whispered. But Walter had already crossed the line in his mind. A line she was still desperately trying to redraw. You and Grant? He asked with a small, dismissive laugh. He's a good man, but he will never understand you the way I do. Her eyes burned with tears she hadn't felt coming. You shouldn't say that, she whispered. Why? He asked gently. Because it's true? She shook her head, her hands trembling, her voice breaking. No, because he's your son, Walter hesitated only a second, only long enough to reveal that the thought had crossed his mind before. Often, too often. Then he stepped closer, close enough that she felt the warmth of his breath on her cheek. "Evelyn," he whispered, "you belong with someone who sees your entire future, not someone who sees only your smile." Something inside her collapsed, not into desire, not into love, into fear. Fear of losing his approval. Fear of disappointing a man who had shaped so much of her progress. Fear of being the small, invisible girl she once was. Fear of being alone again. And fear does not think logically. Fear says stay quiet. Fear says don't anger him. Fear says survive the moment. Walter saw the hesitation. He mistook it for consent. He reached for her hand. And that was the moment, the exact moment the line broke. Evelyn didn't pull away. Not because she wanted him, but because she didn't know how to pull away from someone who had been shaping her world for nearly a year. Her silence fed his certainty. And on April 18th, 2018, in a quiet hallway of a hotel in Atlanta, the dynamic between them changed forever. It shifted from influence to entanglement, from guidance to emotional captivity, from confusion to a secret that would haunt every choice she made afterward. The first time she went home after that night, she looked at herself in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back. She felt guilt, shame, confusion, fear of what Walter would expect next, fear of what would happen if she told Grant the truth. She wanted to end it before it began. She wanted to run, to bury the moment, to scream. But Walter was already calling her the next morning, already sounding warm, gentle, familiar, already reminding her of how much he'd done for her. He didn't need to tell her not to speak of it. He didn't need to force silence. She fell into silence on her own. Because secrets, especially the dangerous ones, trap people long before they realize there's no exit. And from that moment forward, Evelyn's life became a quiet, suffocating battle between who she wanted to be and who Walter had decided she was. A battle she kept hidden. A battle Grant never knew existed. A battle that would follow her into every room, every decision, and eventually into her wedding night. The night everything came undone. May 12, 2018, 6:14 p.m. Savannah, Georgia. By early summer, Evelyn's world had split into two invisible halves. In one half was Grant, gentle, steady, uncomplicated. A man who texted her good morning, who surprised her with small gifts, who asked her opinion on everything as if it mattered more than anything in the world. A man who saw her heart before he ever saw her beauty. And in the other half was Walter, a man who had slowly replaced the quiet spaces in her mind with his presence. A man who never raised his voice, but whose silence carried weight. A man who didn't beg for attention, he expected it. A man who didn't ask for loyalty, he demanded it without speaking. Two lives, two hearts, two versions of Evelyn. And the longer she tried to balance them, the more she began to lose herself. We're just getting started with this story, and it's only going to get more intense from here. I want to know from where all of you are watching from. Drop your location on the comment below. And if you made it this far, type, "I'm still here," so I can see who's really investing and see how this case unfold. Your engagement means everything, so let me know if you're with me. By June 2018, Walter's influence had begun blending into parts of her life she thought she controlled. He recommended books, articles, networking events, investments. He commented on her outfits only slightly, only occasionally. He guided her career decisions with the ease of a man who believed he knew what was best. At first, Evelyn mistook his involvement for support. But support is something that helps you stand. This was something different. Something that quietly replaced her ability to stand on her own. And she didn't see the danger yet. Because the most dangerous cages are the ones decorated with praise. The first time she tried to pull away, she rehearsed the words, "I can't do this. This was a mistake. I need to focus on my relationship with Grant. You are married. You are his father." She planned the conversation 4 times. She practiced staring into a mirror, trying to summon courage. And then Walter called, his voice calm, warm, gentle. "Did you get home safely?" Her breath stilled. "Yes," she whispered. "Good," he said softly. "I worry about you." The phrase slipped through her defenses like it always did. He knew exactly where her vulnerabilities lived. He knew exactly how to make concern feel like connection. She didn't end it that night, and she hated herself for it. August 2018. This was when the relationship shifted from emotional dependence to something more dangerous. It wasn't one moment, not one kiss, not one touch, not one confession. It was a series of small, subtle shifts. The way he leaned closer when he spoke. The way he complimented her growth, her confidence, her ambition. The way he brushed a stray curl from her face during a conversation. The way he called at midnight when he couldn't sleep. The way he asked if she ever felt misunderstood by people her own age. Evelyn noticed the red flags. Every single one. But Walter had already positioned himself in her life as someone she needed. Someone who made her feel important. Someone who felt like stability, even when he was the source of her instability. Dangerous relationships don't always begin with seduction. Some begin with dependency. Some begin with admiration. Some begin with the slow erosion of boundaries. And some begin with a man who knows exactly how to exploit uncertainty. September 10th, 2018, 5:55 p.m., Harrison Estate. The first time Evelyn visited Walter's home, it wasn't her idea. He had invited her to discuss a new business proposal he thought would benefit her future. She hesitated. She told herself it would be quick, professional, harmless. Grant was out of town that weekend. She planned to meet Walter for 30 minutes, then leave. What she walked into was not a business meeting. Walter greeted her warmly, guided her inside, offered her wine she initially declined, complimented her outfit in a way that made her pulse quicken with unease. And when she expressed discomfort, he apologized softly, sweetly, convincingly. The kind of apology that makes a person feel guilty for being uncomfortable. Manipulation is not always loud. Sometimes it's whispered. Sometimes it's wrapped in kindness. She left the estate at 7:13 p.m. with her mind spinning. She should have cut off contact. She should have blocked his number. She should have told Grant everything. But she didn't. Because Walter contacted her again the next morning with a message. "I'm proud of you." 3 words. 3 seconds to read. 3 seconds that changed the way she saw herself that week. And that was the real danger. Not affection. Not desire. Not lust. Validation. Walter made her feel chosen. Important. Seen. Essential. And once you make someone believe they are essential, you never need to demand their obedience. They give it to you freely. By October 2018, March 2019, these months became a quiet storm. Grant grew more serious about their relationship, talked about long-term plans, began imagining a future together. He was falling in love. But Evelyn was falling into chaos. Walter's influence tightened without force, without threats, without anger. He simply expected her to answer when he called, expected her to text back, expected her to show up to events he recommended, expected her to meet him for brief discussions. And Evelyn complied. She didn't know why she couldn't walk away. She didn't know why she felt paralyzed. She didn't know how to explain a relationship that she didn't fully understand herself. And each time she tried to distance herself, each time she ignored a message or hesitated to reply, Walter changed his approach. Not with anger, not with guilt, with silence. Silence that lasted just long enough for her to fear she had disappointed him. Silence that made her check her phone repeatedly. Silence that made her panic in ways she didn't understand. When he finally reached out again, she felt relief. And that relief felt like affection. It felt like attachment. It felt like something she didn't want to live without. She didn't realize she was being conditioned. She didn't see the pattern that professionals would later label coercive emotional attachment. She didn't know she was already inside a trap built on dependence rather than chains. By the end of 2019, the dynamic between Evelyn and Walter had evolved into something the world would eventually call an affair. But Evelyn had no name for it. She simply knew she felt torn. Between right and wrong. Between guilt and fear. Between attraction and manipulation. Between the life she wanted with Grant and the life Walter convinced her she couldn't live without. From the outside, nothing looked alarming. Evelyn appeared stable, successful, admired. A woman moving upward in her career and personal life. But internally, she was drowning slowly. And no one, not Grant, not her friends, not her family, had any idea she was sinking. Because drowning people don't always thrash. Sometimes they sink in silence. And sometimes they keep sinking until the night everything breaks. January 14th, 2020, 7:22 p.m., Charleston, South Carolina. A new year began with quiet resolutions. People celebrated fresh starts, promises, and renewed hope. But for Evelyn, 2020 didn't begin with hope. It began with fear. Fear of Walter. Fear of herself. Fear of the path she was walking without meaning to. By this time, the connection between them unspoken, complicated, dangerous, had become routine, predictable, even normalized in ways that terrified her when she allowed herself to think clearly. But clarity was a luxury she rarely had, because Walter had woven himself into her life so subtly, so thoroughly, that she no longer knew where his influence ended and her choices began. He wasn't violent. He wasn't loud. He wasn't aggressive. He was persistent, warm, patient, calculated. And persistence is a powerful weapon when your target wants to avoid conflict. February 8th, 2020, 10:41 p.m. Grant took Evelyn to dinner at a small Italian restaurant. Candlelight, soft violin music, a future forming in his eyes. He held her hand across the table, thumb brushing her knuckles gently. "I've been thinking about something," he said. Her heart tightened. "About us," he continued, smiling. "About moving forward." She looked down. Her breath caught in her chest. Marriage. A home. A life she wanted but didn't deserve. A life that Walter had quietly contaminated before it ever began. Grant searched her face. "You're shaking," he whispered. "You okay?" She forced a smile. "Yes, just nervous." But she wasn't nervous. She was unraveling, because across that table was a man who loved her unconditionally, and yet her mind kept drifting to the man who should have never been in her life to begin with. Guilt pressed heavily against her ribs. She excused herself to the bathroom, closed the stall door, pressed her forehead against the cool tile. And for the first time, she cried. Deep, silent tears. The kind you cry when you know you're trapped in something you can't explain. When she returned, Grant had already paid the bill. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders, walking her to the car, talking about vacation plans. He never saw the pain. He never suspected the secret, because Evelyn hid it too well. Because Walter trained her to. The world shut down. People worked from home. Families grew closer or fell apart. Evelyn felt both. She spent long days at home with Grant, cooking together, watching movies, falling into a routine that felt warm and real. For a moment, a brief, fleeting moment, she believed she could escape Walter. Distance gave her clarity. Silence gave her space. Grant gave her softness she hadn't felt in years, until Walter reappeared. Through a call she didn't answer, then another, then a text that said, "Don't forget who shaped you." She stared at it with trembling hands. Grant walked into the kitchen. She hid her phone instantly. And that was the moment she realized something horrifying. She wasn't hiding Walter from Grant. She was hiding herself. June 21st, 2020, 3:19 p.m. Harrison Estate. When restrictions lifted, Walter invited Evelyn to the estate for a brief discussion. She planned to decline. She planned to ignore him. She planned to choose herself. But saying no to Walter wasn't just hard. It felt impossible. She arrived at 3:19 p.m. The estate was quiet. Too quiet. Walter greeted her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I missed seeing you," he said. She stiffened. "I came because you said it was important." "It is," he replied. Grant mentioned marriage. Her stomach dropped. "How do you know that?" she whispered. Walter stepped closer. "I know everything my son does." The words felt like a warning, a threat wrapped in a calm tone. Evelyn backed away. "This is not your decision. This is my life." Walter shook his head slowly. "Your life is intertwined with mine more than you want to admit." Her hands trembled. Her throat tightened. "This needs to stop," she said. "I can't live like this." Walter paused, then smiled gently. "You think you can cut me out?" he asked. "You think you can marry my son and pretend none of this exists?" She flinched. His smile softened, but his eyes hardened. "You're part of my world, Evelyn. You can marry Grant if that's what you want, but you will not disappear from mine." Her knees weakened. She realized then, with a clarity she wished she never gained, that Walter didn't see her as a person. He saw her as an extension of himself, something he owned, something he shaped, something he believed he controlled. November 2020, August 2021. These 10 months were a blur of contradictions. Evelyn and Grant grew closer. He proposed on December 23rd, 2020. She said yes through tears. Tears Grant believed were happiness. Tears Walter knew were guilt. Walter attended the engagement dinner. He hugged his son. He toasted the couple. He congratulated Evelyn with a lingering hand on her back. No one noticed. But Evelyn felt that touch long after it ended. As wedding planning began, Walter's presence grew heavier. He offered to help with costs. He offered to recommend venues. He offered to handle logistics to reduce her stress. And every offer felt like another chain. She tried to pull away again, tried to focus on Grant, tried to build a future. But Walter always resurfaced, always reminded her of the past, always made her feel responsible for his emotions. And every time she looked at her engagement ring, she felt like a fraud wearing a symbol she didn't deserve. January 11th, 2022, 10:03 p.m. Evelyn's apartment. 3 months before the wedding, Evelyn sat alone in the dark, hands shaking, heart racing. Walter had just sent a message. When you walk down that aisle, remember, you and I began long before you and Grant. Her breath left her lungs. Her vision blurred. She knew then, everything was going to collapse. Not if, not maybe, but inevitably. Because secrets don't sleep. They don't rest. They don't stay buried. They wait. And Evelyn felt it, deep in her chest. The truth was waking up. She was running out of time, running out of lies, running out of ways to keep two lives separate. And as the wedding day approached, the cracks in her world widened. Soon, they would split open entirely. And when they did, 2 men would die. February 2nd, 2022, 4:56 p.m., Charleston, South Carolina. The wedding was now 3 months away. Invitations printed, venue paid for, dress nearly finished, flowers chosen, seating charts drafted. From the outside, everything was perfect, almost too perfect. The kind of perfection that makes people whisper, they're going to last forever. But beneath the perfect surface, Evelyn was unraveling. Every step toward the altar felt like a step toward disaster. The dress fitting, the floral arrangements, the cake tasting felt like a lie she was building piece by piece. She loved Grant. She wanted to marry him. She wanted a life with him. But she was marrying him carrying a secret she had never spoken, a secret that grew heavier with every passing day. And Walter knew that. He watched Evelyn's panic grow. He watched how her smile tightened. He watched how she avoided his eyes during family gatherings. And, instead of stepping back, he stepped closer. Walter was not the kind of man who let go of something he believed was his. February 21st, 2022, 7:33 p.m. Harrison family dinner. The Harrisons invited Evelyn over for a small family dinner. Grant's mother cooked. Grant joked through most of the meal. The house felt warm, familiar, loving. But Evelyn barely touched her food. Walter sat across the table, calm, composed, attentive. Every time their eyes met, she felt a cold rush through her veins. He said nothing inappropriate, nothing suggestive, nothing that could raise suspicion. But his silence was heavy, intentional, possessive. At one point, Grant excused himself to answer a call. Margaret went to the kitchen to prepare dessert, leaving Evelyn alone with Walter. For 10 seconds, then 15, then 30. Walter spoke without moving his eyes from his plate. "You're tense," he said quietly. Evelyn's breath trembled. "Please don't," she whispered. "Not here." Walter lifted his gaze. "You're marrying my son." His voice was calm, measured, but the words carried weight. "You think what we shared will simply disappear?" She swallowed hard. "It already has." His expression didn't change, not even slightly. "Oh, Evelyn," he murmured. "You know better than that." She felt a chill crawl up her spine. Because he was right. Not morally, but strategically. Walter wasn't speaking as a lover. He was speaking as a man who believed he held power over her. And in many ways, he still did. Seconds later, Grant returned laughing, holding wine glasses, completely unaware of the storm brewing at the same table where his mother placed napkins folded like white lilies. March 2022. Wedding preparations intensify. The closer the date approached, the more Evelyn's anxiety grew. She lost weight, sleep, focus, control. Grant noticed. He asked if she was stressed, asked if the wedding planning was overwhelming, asked if he was doing enough to help. She assured him everything was fine, but nothing was fine. Because the wedding wasn't a beginning, it was the countdown to exposure. Walter started appearing more often. At fittings, at planning meetings, at family gatherings. Always polite, always supportive, always involved, but always watching her. Every time he praised her choices, every time he offered opinions, every time he placed a gentle hand on her back, it felt like a reminder. I'm still here. And Evelyn hated herself for feeling trapped. Because she knew, deep down, the only reason Walter had this power was because she had allowed the connection to continue years longer than it should have. But it wasn't simple. Not anymore. Not after the coercion. Not after the blurred lines. Not after the dependence. Not after the guilt. Evelyn lived in a constant state of internal conflict. One part of her wanted to confess. One part wanted to run. One part told her she had caused all of this. One part whispered that Walter had. And all those parts collided violently in her chest until she could barely breathe. April 11th, 2022. 2:40 p.m. Bridal boutique. At her final dress fitting, Evelyn stood on a pedestal before a wide mirror. Silk gathered around her body, veil cascading down her back. She looked radiant, beautiful, exactly like a bride should. But the reflection stared back at her hollowly. Eyes empty, shoulders tense, breath shallow. A wedding gown is supposed to bring joy, excitement, hope. To Evelyn, it felt like a coffin dress, a final layer covering the truth she'd buried inside herself. Her phone vibrated. A text from Walter. "You look stunning." She froze. Her throat tightened. Her hands trembled. How did he know what she looked like? Who had told him? Was he nearby? The boutique suddenly felt too small, too close, too dangerous. She left early, claimed she was dizzy, cried in her car with the engine running and her heart pounding like a warning bell. Evelyn knew then. Her life was spiraling. Her secret was cracking. Her choices were cornering her. But the wedding date didn't move. It didn't pause for her panic. It didn't care about the storm building inside her. It kept coming. May 1st, 2022. 13 days before the wedding. 7:22 p.m. Evelyn sat alone in the apartment she shared with Grant. He was visiting his mother to finalize last-minute arrangements. The silence pressed against her chest until she struggled to breathe. She opened her journal, something she rarely used. Her hands shook as she wrote, "I am marrying a man I love while carrying a secret that will destroy him. I don't know how to stop the past from stepping into the future." She closed the journal gently, like closing a wound she didn't want to look at anymore. May 7th, 2022. 1 week before the wedding, 9:18 p.m. She tried to confront Walter again, tried to build a wall he couldn't step through, tried to reclaim control of her life. They met at a cafe, public, safe, brightly lit. At least she hoped so. She spoke first. "This ends now." Walter leaned back, unbothered. "You're emotional," he said softly. "You always get this way before big changes." She shook her head. "No, this is different. I'm getting married." He tilted his head. "I know." His calmness terrified her. "I won't be alone with you anymore," she said. "That's smart," he replied. She blinked, thrown off. "But that doesn't change what we have," he added softly. "We don't have anything," she hissed. Walter's expression hardened just slightly, barely noticeable, but enough. "You can lie to yourself," he murmured. "But don't insult my intelligence." Evelyn stared at him, horrified, confused, shaking. Walter had never raised his voice, never shown anger, never threatened her. He didn't have to. His control had always been quiet. As she walked away from the cafe, Evelyn realized something she had never allowed herself to acknowledge. Walter didn't see her as a choice. He saw her as inevitable, and that meant the truth, the one she'd been burying for years, was inevitable too. It would come out, one way or another, and when it did, everything would break. May 8th, 2022. 6 days before the wedding. 10:12 a.m. Charleston, South Carolina. The countdown had begun. 6 days. 6 days until Evelyn Harrison walked down the aisle wearing a smile she didn't feel, cloaked in a future she feared she couldn't hold up, carrying a secret that pressed against her ribs like a concealed weapon. She stood alone on the balcony of her apartment, watching the city move beneath her. Cars hummed. Birds circled in lazy arcs. People walked their dogs. Life continued normally, but nothing inside Evelyn was normal. Her hands trembled constantly now. Her eyes stayed swollen from lack of sleep. Her nerves snapped under even the slightest pressure. Grant noticed. "Talk to me," he said that morning, brushing his thumb along her jaw. "You're distant. Not cold, just far away." She forced a small laugh. "Wedding jitters." Grant wrapped his arms around her. "You don't have to be nervous," he whispered. "We're in this together. Together." The words struck her like a stone, because she wasn't alone in her relationship. Her past wasn't hers alone. Her guilt wasn't hers alone. Walter lived in the spaces she couldn't escape. May 9th, 2022. 5 days before the wedding. 6:33 p.m. The rehearsal dinner seating plan had turned into a minor crisis. Nothing unusual. Nothing dramatic. Just families debating who should sit closer to the head table. Margaret insisted her sister take the front row. Grant argued for his best man. The wedding planner suggested a compromise. They laughed about it, talked over each other, teased one another gently. A normal, functioning family. Except for Walter. He sat quietly at the dining room table, reviewing the seating chart with intense focus. Expression unreadable. Hands clasped in front of him. Every few minutes, Evelyn felt his eyes on her. Watching, studying, measuring. She tried to ignore him. Tried to focus on Margaret's enthusiastic rambling about floral arches. Tried to focus on Grant's hand casually resting at the small of her back. But Walter's presence felt like a shadow creeping along her skin. Later, as they prepared to leave, he approached her when no one was looking. "You've been avoiding me," he said. She stepped back immediately. "I'm preparing for my wedding," she replied, voice shaking. He studied her face. "And yet," he murmured, "you still look guilty every time you see me." Her breath caught. "You're imagining things," she whispered. "No," he said softly. "I'm remembering things." She flinched. Walter smiled gently, too gently. "I'll see you on Saturday," he said. The words sounded normal. But Evelyn heard what he didn't say. "I'll be there." Watching. May 10th, 2022. 4 days before the wedding. 2:07 p.m. Evelyn sat in her car outside the bridal salon, gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles went white. It was time to pick up her wedding dress. She stared at the storefront, unable to open the car door. A wedding dress should be the symbol of a new beginning. For Evelyn, it felt like a sentence. Every stitch whispered her lie louder. Every thread bound her to a future she wasn't sure she could hold up without collapsing. Finally, she forced herself out, collected the dress, and allowed the stylist to hug her excitedly. "You're going to be such a beautiful bride." Evelyn smiled weakly. She didn't feel beautiful. She felt hollow. When she returned to her car, she found a missed call from Walter. No voicemail. But the fact he'd called at all made her stomach twist. He always reached out when she was at her most vulnerable, as if he somehow sensed it. May 11th, 2022. 3 days before the wedding. 7:55 p.m. Grant planned a quiet date night. Homemade dinner. Soft jazz. A slow dance in the living room. A moment of peace in the chaos. But Evelyn couldn't hold on to it. When Grant placed his hands on her waist, she froze. She couldn't stop thinking about the secret sitting between them like a poison. Grant sensed it. He pulled back gently. "Tell me what's wrong," he whispered. "You're scaring me." She opened her mouth. She almost said it. Almost confessed everything. But fear slammed the door shut. Fear of hurting him. Fear of losing him. Fear of facing what she allowed to happen. Instead, she shook her head. "It's just stress. I'll be okay." Grant didn't believe her. But he kissed her forehead and let it go. Because he trusted her. Because he loved her. Because he didn't know what she had done. May 12th, 2022. 2 days before the wedding. 11:14 a.m. Harrison Estate. It was a simple visit, dropping off decorations, coordinating deliveries, confirming the rehearsal details. At least, that's what she expected. But Walter intercepted her before she reached Margaret's office. He stood in the hallway, hands in his pockets, posture relaxed but eyes sharp. "You're running from me," he said. Evelyn's pulse raced. "I'm getting married in 2 days," she replied shakily. "I don't want to talk about the past." Walter took a step closer. "Everything you're doing is because of the past." "No," she whispered. "I'm doing this because I love Grant." "And yet," Walter said, "you've been acting like a woman terrified of her own shadow." She backed away. "Please, just let me go." Walter's eyes softened without losing their intensity. "You're marrying my son. That means we're connected whether you like it or not." Her throat tightened. "You need to let this go," she whispered. Walter frowned, an expression she rarely saw on him. "I can't," he said simply. She felt her heart drop. He meant it. Every word. He wasn't threatening her. He was confessing something darker. Walter didn't think he was doing anything wrong. He genuinely believed he had a rightful place in her life, in her marriage, in her future. And that realization shook Evelyn to her core. May 13th, 2022. 1 day before the wedding, 3:06 p.m. The final rehearsal. The final family gathering before vows were spoken. Margaret cried. Grant laughed. Photographers snapped casual pictures. Everything looked perfect. But Evelyn felt disconnected from the world around her, like she was watching her own life from the outside. When it came time to practice the processional, she froze. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, her palms slick with sweat, her vision blurring. Walking down that aisle felt impossible. Grant rushed to her side. Hey, breathe, he whispered. She forced herself to straighten, forced herself to smile, forced herself to walk. Everyone applauded at the end. Everyone except Walter. He stood in the corner of the room, arms crossed lightly, eyes locked on her, not smiling, not applauding, just watching, always watching. And Evelyn realized something horrifying. She wasn't nervous about marrying Grant. She was terrified of the truth meeting daylight, because secrets always demand to be seen. And tomorrow, on May 14th, 2022, her secret would meet its reckoning. A reckoning that would end 2 lives. May 14th, 2022, Wedding Day, 6:12 a.m., Charleston, South Carolina. Evelyn awoke with her heart hammering against her ribcage. Wedding days usually begin with excitement, with butterflies, laughter, champagne, and soft music playing beneath whispered conversations. But for Evelyn, the day began with dread. The air felt heavy. The silence felt sharp. Her chest tightened with each breath, as though something inside her was warning. This is the day everything breaks. She sat up in bed slowly, the early morning light slipping past the curtains. Her wedding dress hung across the room white, flawless, shimmering with innocence she didn't feel. Grant was at the Harrison estate already, preparing with his groomsmen. Evelyn's bridesmaids would arrive in 2 hours. For now, she was alone. Just her and the secret she had carried for years. A secret that had poisoned her sleep, her smile, her future. And she knew. No vow spoken today could erase the past behind her. 8:22 a.m. Bridal Suite, Magnolia Estate Hotel. Evelyn's bridesmaids surrounded her with laughter and soft chatter. Makeup artists blending foundation. Hairstylists curling strands of her hair. Photographers snapping candid shots. They saw joy. They saw excitement. What they didn't see, the tremor in her fingers, the stiffness in her smile, the panic rising behind her eyes. Evelyn sat still as the stylist pinned her veil. Every pin felt like a needle pressing into her heart. Ready to be Mrs. Harrison? Her maid of honor asked cheerfully. Evelyn forced a smile. Of course. But inside, she whispered, I'm not ready for what this day will reveal. 9:51 a.m. Meanwhile, Harrison Estate. Grant stood in front of a mirror, adjusting his tie as the groomsmen teased him playfully. You're shaking, his best man laughed. You look more nervous than Evelyn. Grant grinned. I'm marrying the love of my life. I just want everything to be perfect. Walter entered the room at that exact moment. He clapped his son on the shoulder. You look good, Grant. Grant hugged him briefly. Thanks, Dad, I'm excited. Walter smiled warmly at his son. Too warmly, too calmly. Beneath the surface, his expression held something else entirely. Something older. Something territorial. Today is a day to celebrate, Walter said. Grant nodded. Walter's eyes shifted, just briefly, to the window overlooking the valley. The same window where he had once watched Evelyn walk through the garden years earlier. And in that moment, Walter's jaw tensed. Any casual observer would have missed it. But that small tightening revealed the truth. Walter had no intention of letting go. Not today. Not ever. 10:26 a.m. Bridal Suite. Evelyn stood in front of the mirror wearing her wedding gown. The room erupted with gasps. She was stunning, radiant, a vision of purity and grace. But Evelyn didn't recognize herself. Her reflection felt like a stranger wearing her skin. A woman pretending to be someone she wasn't. A woman preparing to walk into a ceremony built on lies. Her maid of honor handed her the bouquet. You look perfect. Perfect. The word clung to her like a suffocating cloth. Evelyn stepped back from the mirror, clutching the flowers, trying to steady her breathing. No one noticed the flicker of fear that passed across her face. No one saw how tightly she gripped the bouquet, as if holding onto something real in a world built on secrets. 11:03 a.m. Harrison Estate ceremony grounds. Guests began arriving. White chairs lined the garden aisle. Soft music floated through the air. Photographers snapped photos beside the floral arch. Grant stood near the altar, greeting guests with nervous excitement. He kept glancing toward the house, waiting to catch sight of Evelyn, waiting for the moment she would walk toward him. He had no idea how close the day was to shattering. Walter stood near a group of business associates, answering polite questions. But his attention wasn't on the conversation. His eyes drifted toward the driveway, waiting, expecting, claiming. 11:47 a.m. Bridal suite final moments before ceremony. The bridal party left the room, heading downstairs to take their places for the processional. Evelyn remained alone. She closed her eyes, inhaling shakily. Her mind raced. Can I do this? What if he says something today? What if Grant finds out? What if Walter tries to control this moment too? What if everything collapses before the vows? Her heart thudded violently. Sweat dampened her palms. Her stomach felt hollow. She walked toward the window, pulling the curtain aside just barely. She saw the aisle, the white arch, the guests, and Walter, standing still, watching the venue, every part of him composed. He looked up, right at her window. Their eyes met. Evelyn stumbled backward as if she'd been shoved. Her breath caught. Her chest tightened. Her vision blurred. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't frowning. He was simply present, pervasively present, unmovably present, like a past that refused to stay buried. 12:02 p.m. The processional begins. Music swelled across the garden. Guests turned. Camera shutters clicked. The bridal party walked one by one, bridesmaids in soft pastels, groomsmen in crisp navy suits. Grant stood waiting, hands clasped, eyes bright with anticipation. But Evelyn was frozen at the top of the stairs inside the estate. Her maid of honor whispered urgently, "It's time." Evelyn's legs refused to move. She heard the music. She heard the murmurs. She felt the eyes waiting. But all she could think about was the truth echoing in her mind. You're walking toward a man who doesn't know who you've been. 12:08 p.m. The walk begins. Evelyn stepped outside. Sunlight hit her face. Warm. Blinding. Guests stood. Grant exhaled, breath trembling with emotion. Evelyn took one step. Then another. Every heartbeat thundered in her ears. Every breath felt like a lie escaping her lungs. Halfway down the aisle, she saw Walter. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't clapping. He was simply watching her. Watching the way someone watches a possession they believe belongs to them. And that single look, that cold, quiet claim, was the final crack in Evelyn's sanity. Her heart began to race uncontrollably. Her palms slicked with sweat. Her knees weakened. The aisle stretched impossibly long. Her vision tunneled. Her breath hitched. She wasn't walking toward a future anymore. She was walking toward an explosion. One she knew she couldn't stop. One she knew she caused. One she knew Walter controlled. And in that moment, as petals scattered beneath her shoes, Evelyn realized, by the end of today, someone would bleed. By the end of today, a truth would stand exposed. By the end of today, no one would leave the estate the same. She reached the altar. Grant reached for her hands. Walter watched, and the world held its breath. May 14th, 2022. Wedding Day. 12:11 p.m. Harrison Estate Garden. The ceremony began under a wide Carolina sky, soft clouds drifting lazily, sunlight glowing warmly across rows of white chairs and the arch covered in ivory roses. It looked perfect. It felt perfect, but only on the surface. Because beneath the beauty, beneath the music, beneath the fragile facade of joy, a storm churned in silence. Evelyn stood beside Grant, veil trembling gently in the breeze. She felt everyone's eyes on her, felt every camera lens capturing what the world believed was the happiest moment of her life. But the only eyes she felt burning through her skin belonged to Walter. He stood in the second row, hands clasped, expression unreadable. Watching her, watching every breath, watching every swallow, watching every hesitation. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't emotional. He was calculating, possessive, certain. And that certainty squeezed around Evelyn's throat like a tightening rope. 12:13 p.m. The officiant begins. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today. The words floated gently over the audience, but Evelyn didn't hear them. Her heartbeat drowned everything out. Her vision flickered. Her breath shortened. Grant squeezed her hands gently. His touch grounded her. For half a second. You okay? He whispered. She nodded, though her body felt heavy with dread, because she knew exactly why she was trembling. She wasn't just nervous. She was terrified. 12:17 p.m. Vows begin. Grant went first. He unfolded a small piece of paper, voice shaking just slightly with emotion. Evelyn, from the moment I met you, I knew. His words were soft, simple, pure. Words born from love, from trust, from the belief that the woman standing before him was exactly who he thought she was. Evelyn blinked rapidly as tears slipped down her cheeks. He mistook them for joy. Around them, guests dabbed their eyes. Photographers stepped closer. The wedding planner nodded proudly from the side. Grant continued, "You are my anchor, my peace, my home." Home. The word stabbed her. Because Grant didn't know she had built that home on a lie. He didn't know he was marrying a woman carrying a secret so heavy it bent her entire spine. He didn't know the man sitting behind him had once claimed her in ways no one in this ceremony could ever imagine. Grant folded the paper, lifted her hands to his mouth, and kissed her fingertips. "I love you," he whispered with absolute certainty. The kind of certainty only innocence can create. Evelyn's chest caved in. She was about to speak her vows she didn't deserve to speak. Vows she feared she couldn't finish without confessing everything. But she also knew one truth. If she confessed, she would destroy Grant. If she stayed silent, she would destroy herself. 12:22 p.m. Evelyn's vows. The officiant turned to her. "Evelyn, you may read your vows." Her fingers trembled around the paper. The words she wrote 3 months ago shook in her hands, soft promises about loyalty, love, growth, and honesty. Honesty. The cruelest word on the page. She inhaled slowly, trying to steady her voice. But before she spoke, before she uttered a single promise, her eyes drifted toward Walter. His stare was unblinking, unmoving, unrelenting. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't affectionate. It was ownership. A reminder of what he believed they still shared. A reminder that she wasn't free. Not from him. Not from the past. Her breath hitched. Her vision blurred. The paper slipped slightly from her fingers. "Evelyn?" the officiant asked gently. "It's okay. Take your time." But time was the very thing she was running out of. Grant looked worried now. He squeezed her hand. "You're shaking," he whispered. She nodded. Because she couldn't lie, not in that moment. Not with the truth clawing its way out from under her skin. She opened her mouth, and nothing came out. The audience shifted uncomfortably. A few whispers scattered through the crowd. She tried again, but the words tangled in her throat. Sweat pooled along her spine. Her heart raced violently. Her chest tightened, as though pulled inward by invisible hands. Because right there, right in front of everyone, she realized something. She wasn't marrying just Grant. She was marrying herself to the lie, to the guilt, to the shadow sitting in the second row, to the past that refused to stay buried. Her silence stretched too long. Grant leaned in, whispering, "You can do this." But the truth was, she couldn't, because she felt it happening. The breakdown, the unraveling, the mental fracture she could no longer conceal. She lowered the paper slowly, breath trembling. And that was when Walter did something subtle, so small, so quick, so quiet, but devastating. He nodded, just once, the kind of nod that said, "Remember, don't forget, you are mine." Her stomach plummeted, her knees weakened, her voice finally broke from her lungs. Shaky, strangled, barely audible. I can't." Gasps rippled through the audience. Grant froze. "What do you mean?" he whispered urgently. "Evelyn, what's wrong?" She shook her head, tears streaming uncontrollably now. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The guests exchanged confused glances. Cameras lowered. The music faded into nothing. Grant grabbed her hands. "Evelyn, talk to me. What's happening? You're scaring me." Walter didn't move. Not an inch. His expression remained calm. Too calm. Because he knew this moment. He had predicted it. He had cultivated it. Evelyn felt the edges of her sanity collapsing. She couldn't tell the truth in front of everyone. She couldn't say the words that would kill Grant's spirit in an instant. But she couldn't finish the vows either. She was trapped, frozen between a future she didn't deserve and a past that refused to die. If you are enjoying this story, I need you to do something important. Hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and share this video with your loved ones. Stories like this one contain warnings that could protect someone you care about from making a terrible mistake. Do it now, and then stay with me. 12:28 p.m. Ceremony disrupted. Margaret rushed forward. "Sweetheart, are you faint? Do you need water?" Bridesmaids gathered around. Groomsmen murmured anxiously. Grant held her tightly, terrified. "Look at me," he said firmly. "You're okay. I'm right here. I'm not letting anything happen to you." His voice was warm and breaking, because for the first time, Grant could feel it. Something was deeply wrong, something he didn't understand, something she had never told him. Evelyn met his eyes, and in that moment, she knew The truth was going to come out today, one way or another, and there would be no returning from the aftermath. While the audience waited in shock, while Grant begged for answers, while Margaret hovered in panic, Walter simply watched, silent, still, certain, and Evelyn felt it deep inside her bones. This was the beginning of the end, not of the ceremony, but of their lives. The ceremony had frozen in time. Flowers rustled in the breeze. Chairs creaked. Whispers spread like wildfire. But Evelyn heard none of it. Her heart pounded too loudly. Her breaths came too quickly. Her vision narrowed until only one thing remained in focus: Grant's face. Confused. Terrified. Searching for an explanation she could not give him. "Let's step inside," the officiant suggested softly. Margaret nodded quickly. "Yes, yes, everyone. Please remain seated. This happens sometimes." Nerves. But even she didn't believe her own words. Grant placed a steadying hand on Evelyn's back and guided her toward the estate. Walter watched them walk away, his face unreadable, his posture still. He didn't ask if Evelyn was all right. He didn't step forward. He didn't need to. The damage had already been done. 12:34 p.m. Inside the Harrison estate, the library. Grant closed the door behind them with trembling hands. His voice cracked the moment they were alone. "Evelyn, what's going on? Talk to me." She was shaking uncontrollably now. Her veil tangled in her fingers. Her breath hitched violently. Her mind spiraled. "I can't," she whispered. Grant stepped closer, voice breaking. "Did I do something? Did something happen? Are you sick? Tell me so I can help you." "Help." The word stabbed her. He still believed he could fix this. He still believed love was enough. He still believed she was the woman he thought he knew. Evelyn backed away until her spine hit the bookshelf. Grant's chest tightened. He had never seen her like this. "Evelyn. Sweetheart. You're scaring me." His voice trembled. "Please, please let me in." She pressed her trembling hands against her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For what?" His voice cracked. "For everything." Grant moved closer, slowly, like approaching a wounded animal. "Whatever it is," he whispered, "we'll face it together." She lowered her hands, and he froze, because he saw it. Not fear, not nerves. Guilt. Deep, consuming guilt. "Evelyn." His voice trailed off, trembling. "What are you not telling me?" Her lips parted. The truth clawed at her throat. A truth she'd buried for years. A truth she'd drowned in silence. A truth that was rising like a tidal wave she could no longer hold back. "Grant," she whispered shakily. "There's something in my past, something I should have told you long ago." Grant's heart dropped. His hands began to shake. "Please don't say this on our wedding day," he whispered, voice breaking. "Please don't say something that hurts both of us." Her eyes filled with tears. "I never wanted to. I never planned to. I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't know how to escape." "Escape what?" Grant demanded, breath trembling. From who? Her silence was the answer, and Grant felt it, like ice water pouring down his spine. He took a step back, then another. He wasn't crying yet, but the shock was flooding his face. "Tell me who," he whispered. She opened her mouth, and a knock cut through the room like a blade. 3 soft knocks. Measured. Calm. Intentional. Grant turned toward the door. The handle shifted, and Walter stepped inside. 12:38 p.m. Walter enters. "Is everything all right?" Walter asked gently, too gently. Grant blinked. "Dad? Why are you here?" Walter's eyes flicked briefly toward Evelyn, just for a split second. But it was enough. Grant saw something he had never seen before. Fear in Evelyn's face. And certainty in Walter's. A certainty that didn't belong in the eyes of a concerned father-in-law. Grant stepped instinctively between them. "Dad, what's going on?" Walter kept his voice smooth, calm. "Nothing. I just wanted to make sure Evelyn was all right." Evelyn pressed against the bookshelf. Her breath caught. Walter's eyes locked onto hers again. That was when Grant's voice broke. "Why? Why are you looking at her like that?" Walter glanced at his son. "Grant, this isn't—" Grant cut him off sharply. "No. Tell me." Walter inhaled slowly. "Son, this is not the time." Grant's voice rose frantic, cracking. "Tell me why she's terrified of you." Walter stiffened slightly. A tiny movement, barely noticeable. But Grant saw it. Evelyn saw it. The truth was no longer hiding. Grant turned toward Evelyn with shaking hands. Did something happen between you two?" Evelyn closed her eyes, and Grant felt the world tilt. "Evelyn, no. No. No." Please say it's not him. He grabbed her shoulders, voice collapsing. Please don't tell me this. Her tears answered for her. Grant stumbled backward like he'd been struck. No. No. Dad. Evelyn. No. Tell me I'm wrong. Please. Walter stepped forward, voice alarmingly calm. Grant. Listen, let's talk privately. Don't come near me, Grant screamed. The sound echoed against the mahogany walls. Evelyn's sob cracked through the silence. Walter's mask flickered, briefly revealing irritation, annoyance, possession. Grant saw it. That was the moment his heart shattered. You, Grant, choked out, voice shaking violently. What did you do to her? Walter inhaled. Son, answer me. Walter turned his gaze toward Evelyn. He shouldn't have, because Grant saw it. The connection, the memory, the unspoken truth that should have never existed between them. Grant's voice broke into a strangled whisper. Oh my God, it was you. It's been you. He staggered backward, hands shaking uncontrollably. Dad, how could you? His voice cracked. She was supposed to be mine. She was supposed to marry me. And all this time, his body trembled as rage overtook him. You betrayed me. His voice rose into a cry. You both betrayed me. Evelyn collapsed to her knees. Walter reached out. Grant stopped, just calm down. But Grant snapped. Don't touch me. His scream tore through the room like shrapnel. And in that moment, in that violent rupture of trust, love, and sanity, the fuse was lit. This room, this moment, this confrontation would lead directly to bloodshed. Two men would not leave this estate alive, and Evelyn would never outrun what came next. For a moment, no one moved. Grant's screams still echoed off the walls. Evelyn knelt on the floor, sobbing. Walter stood rigid, the calmness draining from his face. 3 people, 1 room, 1 secret finally ripped open, and nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever return to the way it had been. Grant's hands trembled as he pointed at them wildly. How long? He demanded. His voice cracked. How long has this been going on? Evelyn shook her head violently. It wasn't supposed to happen, Grant. Please, it wasn't. How long? He shouted. She choked out the words. Years. Grant's body buckled. Years. Not months. Not weeks. Years. He stumbled back against the desk, gripping its edge like a drowning man clinging to a floating piece of wood. His father stepped forward. Grant, listen to me. But Grant snapped. Don't. Just don't. Walter froze, because for the first time, he realized control was slipping away. The calm persona he built for decades cracked at the edges. He spoke again too gently, too confidently. You're emotional right now. You need to collect yourself. Evelyn and I. Grant lunged. Don't say her name. The room vibrated with the force of his rage. You touched her. You, my father. You betrayed me in the worst way possible. Walter stood straighter, voice tightening. It wasn't like that. Grant laughed through tears. A broken, guttural sound. Oh, that's right. Of course it wasn't. You never do anything wrong, do you? His voice grew stronger, filled with venom. Always the great Walter Harrison. Always in control. Always the one pulling strings. Walter's jaw clenched. Grant, listen. No, Grant roared. For once, you listen. 12:45 p.m. Grant turned to Evelyn. His expression shattered. You could have told me, he whispered. You could have given me the truth. You should have trusted me. Evelyn sobbed. I was scared. I didn't want to lose you. I didn't know how to escape him. Escape me? Walter snapped suddenly. His tone sharpened. A different man emerged. One Evelyn had always feared. Grant's head jerked toward his father. Oh, he whispered. There it is. There's the real you. Walter's eyes flickered. Too late. Grant stepped between Evelyn and his father. You manipulated her, he said. You coerced her. You destroyed her. Walter's voice deepened. I didn't destroy anything. Grant shoved him. Walter stumbled back a step. Don't you dare blame her, Grant hissed. You don't get to twist this. You don't get to rewrite what you did. Walter took a slow breath. Grant. Son. I never meant. Stop calling me that. The words were low, cold, sharp. Grant wasn't Grant anymore. He was a man shattered by betrayal. A man pushed past reason. A man who had nothing left to lose. The argument escalated rapidly. This wedding is over, Grant said. Everything is over. And when everyone finds out what you did, Walter lunged forward. You won't tell anyone. Grant didn't back down. Watch me. Evelyn rose unsteadily to her feet, fear twisting her insides. Stop, she cried. Both of you, please. Neither man heard her. Grant pointed a trembling finger at his father. You groomed her. You used her. And you think you're going to walk away from this? No, not this time. Walter's voice sharpened. You will not destroy this family with your emotions. Grant stepped closer until they were inches apart. This family was already destroyed, he whispered, the moment you touched her. A silence fell, tight, tense, charged with something violent. Then Walter did something Evelyn had seen before, years ago. A gesture so small, yet so terrifying. He leaned in, lowered his voice, and spoke as if addressing an equal adversary. You don't understand the full story. Grant's eyes widened with pure fury. There is no other story. He shoved Walter again harder. Walter shoved him back. And that was the final spark. Grant swung. A blind punch. A punch fueled by betrayal, heartbreak, and rage so deep it had nowhere left to go. It landed. Walter stumbled. Grant lunged again, and the struggle exploded. 12:49 p.m. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't skillful. It wasn't controlled. It was emotional, chaotic, desperate. Two men, one fueled by guilt, the other fueled by devastation, collided in a violent storm of shoves, swings, and raw hatred. Evelyn screamed for them to stop. They didn't. Walter grabbed Grant by the collar. Grant slammed him into the bookshelf. Books crashed to the floor. A lamp shattered. Wood splintered. A lifetime of tension erupted all at once. Grant's voice broke between punches. You ruined my life. Walter blocked, shoved, grabbed, fighting not like a father defending himself, but like a man fighting for control. Evelyn rushed toward them, hands outstretched, voice trembling. Stop. Please, please stop. Neither man heard her. And then, the fall. A violent stumble. A slip. A crash into the corner of the table. Grant collapsed. Walter froze. Evelyn screamed. 12:51 p.m. Grant lay on the floor. Still. Too still. Blood seeped beneath him. Slow. Dark. Expanding. Evelyn dropped to her knees beside him. Grant, baby, please look at me, please. His eyes fluttered. He tried to speak. One word escaped. Broken. Soft. Barely a whisper. Why? And then, nothing. Walter stepped back, horrified. What have I done? But his voice held something else. Something Evelyn recognized. Fear of losing control. Fear not of the tragedy, but of exposure. 12:53 p.m. Evelyn rose slowly. Her tears stopped. Her breath steadied. Something inside her snapped. Quietly. Cleanly. Finally. Walter approached, hands raised. Evelyn, listen, this was an accident. We can fix this. We can. She didn't hear him. Not really. All she heard was Grant's last word. All she saw was Walter standing over two lives he had destroyed. All she felt was something cold and final inside her. Walter reached for her, and that was his mistake. Evelyn acted before she thought, before she could stop herself, before sanity could pull her back. It was fast, instinctive, fueled by years of fear, guilt, manipulation, and pain. And in seconds, Walter Harrison lay on the floor beside his son. Both men gone. Both lives ended. Both victims of a secret that began long before this day. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video. Do it now. By 12:59 p.m., the bride stands alone. She stood in the center of the library. A bride surrounded by silence, a wedding dress stained with tragedy, a heart hollowed out. Her wedding day was over. Her future was gone. Her life, as she knew it, was finished. But she didn't run. She didn't scream anymore. She didn't collapse. She walked toward the window, looked out at the garden filled with guests waiting for a ceremony that would never continue, and whispered, I'm free. But she wasn't. Not truly. Because from this moment forward, Evelyn was alive, but everything she loved was dead. And the world would never understand the full truth of what happened in that library. Only that a bride walked in, and walked out alone. The sirens arrived before the screams stopped echoing across the garden. Guests watched from the ceremony chairs, frozen in shock, as police cars lined the gravel driveway and paramedics rushed into the mansion. No one understood what had happened. No one could imagine the depth of the secret that had detonated inside the Harrison library. No one could comprehend why the bride, still in her gown, walked out with her hands shaking, her veil torn, her face drained of all color. Evelyn didn't collapse. She didn't faint. She didn't run. She simply stood there, surrounded by roses and white chairs and the remnants of a wedding that never was. Her world had ended, and yet the day continued around her. The sun still warm, the sky still bright, the music still echoing faintly from the speakers. Two bodies were carried out under white sheets. One belonging to the man she loved. One belonging to the man who had controlled her for years. Grant Harrison. Walter Harrison. A son and father. A groom and patriarch. Gone within minutes. Victims of a truth no family was ever meant to face. 2:11 p.m. Charleston Police Department. Evelyn sat in an interrogation room, silent, unmoving, staring at her reflection in the one-way glass. Her wedding dress was stained. Her hands trembled uncontrollably. Her voice refused to emerge. Detectives circled her with questions, theories, accusations. Evelyn, what happened in that room? Did Walter attack you? Did Grant come at you? Were you defending yourself? Are you aware 2 people are dead? Talk to us. But Evelyn didn't speak, not because she didn't want to, but because her mind was locked between 2 realities, the woman she had been and the woman she had become. The detectives eventually stepped out, frustrated by her silence. But silence was all Evelyn had left. The truth was too heavy to carry. The shame was too deep to expose. The world would never understand anyway. What began years ago in the quiet corners of the Harrison home had ended in a violent reckoning no one could undo. May 20th, 2022. 6 days later. Charleston County Courthouse. The court leaned heavily toward what the evidence suggested. A violent confrontation. A young bride caught between 2 men. A struggle that spiraled. No intent. No premeditation. No malice. The state could not prove she planned anything. Could not prove she wanted anyone dead. Could not prove she saw a future without the Harrisons. Evelyn was given a life sentence. But not behind bars. No prison cell. No handcuffs. No judge's gavel condemning her to decades. Her punishment was far more devastating. She was released. Free to walk in the world. Free to breathe air the 2 men she lost would never breathe again. Free to live with the knowledge that she survived the day her past finally crushed the present. The law had no place for the complexity of what had happened. There were no charges that fit neatly. No category for a crime born out of fear, manipulation, guilt, and rage. The file closed quietly. No public trial. No dramatic verdict. No sensational courtroom scene. Just paperwork. And a sentence unlike any other. No imprisonment. Case closed. Defendant released. Evelyn stepped out of the courthouse into warm sunlight, wearing simple clothes and hollow eyes. A free woman. Legally. But not spiritually. June 2022, present day. Evelyn moved far from Charleston. Far from the mansion. Far from the garden where her life split open. Far from the ghosts that whispered in every room. She rented a small apartment overlooking a quiet street. She worked in silence. Ate in silence. Existed in silence. Every morning, she woke to the same realization. She was alone because of her choices. Because of her silence. Because of the man who had taken her youth. Because of the man whose heart she broke. Because she loved the wrong person. Because she trusted the wrong person. Because she let herself drown in a secret she was never strong enough to speak aloud. Some nights, when the world outside was still, she walked to the mirror and stared at the woman looking back at her. A woman who once dreamed of a wedding. A husband. A home. A family. Now she carried something else instead. A lifetime of guilt. A lifetime of memory. A lifetime of tragedy she could never outrun. People often say prisons are built of concrete and steel. But Evelyn learned the truth. The strongest prison is built from the inside. From secrets you never confessed. From choices you can never undo. From blood you can never wash off your hands. She walks freely. But she is not free. Because the sentence she carries is one no judge could write. A lifetime condemned to remember. A lifetime condemned to regret. A lifetime condemned to survive. And that is the true crime of Evelyn Harrison. The bride who walked into her wedding as a woman and walked out as a ghost. If this case touched your heart, give a like to the video. Subscribe to the channel right now for more mysterious documentary crime stories. You don't miss the next case we will sharing. And tell me in the comments where you're watching this video from and what time it is there right now. If you know of a similar case to this, or if you've had ever encountered such a difficult situation, share your experience. It makes me very happy to know which city you're watching from and at what time of day you're watching, and also to be able to exchange experiences that can help others. A big hug the size of my heart. Did you learn something from this story? share it in the comment below. You can support this channel by liking the video and sharing it to the person who need to see, so I can keep bringing more crime stories like this. Thank you so much for your support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story in the screen. You can see 2 new life crime stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story, with love and respect.